先生们，请各位就座，今天的活动即将开始。
Humanity fears for its future. But the future doesn't start next year, it starts today. What can we do to make this planet a fairer, safer world?
Good afternoon, Mr. John Lee, Ms. Liu Xining, Mr. Yang Yirei, Ms. Regina Ip, Mr. Patrick Zhang, Dr. Kennedy Wong, Dr. Herman Hu, and ladies, gentlemen, and reporters. Welcome to this important conference, which is on a compelling theme that's of really crucial importance to all of us.
That's right. 尊敬的李家超行政长官、卢新宁副主任、杨义瑞副特派员、叶刘淑仪女士、郑安业先生、黄英豪博士、胡晓明博士，各位女士先生，大家下午好，欢迎出席今天举行的国际传播高端论坛，探讨一个十分重要的议题。
You know, whatever your background, your culture, your nationality, your culture, I think we can all agree that human beings around the globe all want the same thing. We'd like to live in a fairer, safer world. We want this for the communities in which we live. We want it for ourselves and for our loved ones, and we want it for our children and the generations to come.
无论在座各位来自不同的背景、国籍和文化，相信大家都有共同宏愿，就是迈向更公平、安全的世界。大家都希望我们生活的社会和世界变得更公平和安全，让我们和至亲以及下一代的生活都可以变得更加美好。
Now, I'm Yuri Vitachi, and this is my co-MC, Binky Sun from RTHK, and we're thrilled to be emceeing this important conference today. Now, this is the second time that the Hong Kong Coalition and Friday Culture have teamed up to do a forum.
大家好，我是辛巧琪 Binky， 今天十分荣幸和 Neri 在一起担任大会司仪。 今天的论坛其实已经第2次由香港再出发大联盟和 Friday Culture 联合主办。
Now, you probably already know this, but the Hong Kong Coalition is a group of 1,500 well-known Hong Kong people who have come together to help this community fulfill its promise of a very bright future. And Friday Culture is a new Hong Kong-based media group. It started last year, and it shares Chinese and Asian culture to the world through a website, fridayeveryday.com.
香港再出发大联盟由1500多位社会各界人士担任共同发起人，推动香港重新出发，再创辉煌。而 Friday Culture 在上一年成立，旨在传扬中国和亚洲传统文化及声音，给予世界各地的读者观众。
Okay, now Binky and I are going to go over there to make some space for some more important and interesting people than us. Let's go.
Sure.
Okay, it's our honor to invite our officiating guests to officially kickstart the ceremony.
接下来我们要介绍今天活动主礼嘉宾，并且举行简单而隆重启动仪式。
And first and most, the Honourable Mr. John Lee, Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR.
有请香港特别行政区行政长官李家超先生。
Ms. Lu Xining, Deputy Director of the Liaison Office of the Central People's Government in Hong Kong SAR.
有请中央人民政府驻香港特别行政区联络办公室副主任卢新宁女士。
Mr. Yang Yirei, Deputy Commissioner of the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Hong Kong SAR.
有请外交部驻香港特别行政区特派员公署特派员杨义瑞先生。
The Honourable Mrs. Regina Ip, Convener of the Executive Council of the Hong Kong SAR.
有请香港特别行政区行政会议召集人叶刘淑仪女士。
Dr. Herman Hu, Chairman of Friday Culture Limited.
有请 Friday Culture 主席胡晓明博士。
Dr. Kennedy Wong, Vice Secretary General of the Hong Kong Coalition.
有请香港再出发大联盟副秘书长黄英豪博士。
And last but not least, Mr. Patrick Zhang, Chief Executive Officer of Chow Tai Fook Enterprises.
有请周大福企业有限公司行政总裁曾安耶先生。
Now we'd like you to hover your hand over the column, but don't touch it yet.
大家可以先把手掌放在正数上方。
And let's all join in the countdown. Ready?
Yeah.
3,
2,
2,
1. Let's give a good hands of applause.
So we declare the conference officially open.
现在国际传播高端论坛正式启动。
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please stay on the stage for a moment for photographs.
有请工作人员可以先移动一下灯柱，在台的后方。
Okay.
大概可以双手可以离开了。
Okay, please stay on stage, Dr. Wong. Right. Yes, you're not done yet. Yes. So let's have a group photograph of these participants.
我们再来一张大合照。
This is Hong Kong tradition. In Hong Kong, nothing happens without a photograph. As they say on the internet, pics or it didn't happen.
站好。
Thank you, and please stay on the stage for a moment longer. Let's ask the members of the Hong Kong Coalition and Friday Culture to come up on stage to join the group on stage.
我们现在有请香港再出发大联盟和 Friday Culture 代表上台。谢谢大家，我们现在请各位嘉宾到台前座位就座，请胡晓明博士留步。
Thank you very much. You can all leave the stage except for Dr. Herman Hu. I'm going to ask Dr. Herman Hu to stay behind for a moment.
我们现在有请胡晓明博士为我们致欢迎词。
Thank you, Nuri. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, the Honorable Mr. John Lee, Ms. Lu Xingning, Mr. Yang Yirei, the Honorable Mrs. Regina Yip, Mr. Patrick Zhang, ladies and gentlemen. I warmly welcome you to our forum today. This is the second live international forum organized by the Hong Kong Coalition and Friday Culture. And I hope you and everyone watching the event from around the world will be able to take something valuable away from it. To show what's possible, allow me to just take a minute to look back at our first event, which was held at the end of May last year. A couple of predictions were made. How did they fare? At last year's forum, Ronnie Chen predicted that the Hong Kong government, now that it has a smoothly functioning legislature, should be able to formulate long-term plans to boost land supply and make real progress towards solving the housing problem. The prediction has clearly come true, and we received some interesting details in recent policy address by our esteemed Chief Executive. Eric Lee acknowledged that the very negative portrayal of Hong Kong and mainland China in the international media, but predicted that the credibility of the mainstream press would fall as a number of alternative voices rose. The Edelman Barometer and other studies show that this is exactly what is happening. Today, many voices are trying to tell a broader, deeper, fairer story of what's happening. Many of us in this room are working actively to advance that process. But we all need to do more. As we all know, there are wars in Europe, and unfortunately, there are someone who would like to see conflict in East Asia too. We should be building roads and bridges and contributing to making it a better and more harmonious world for everyone, instead of creating conflicts and problems all around. This is geopolitics, but there are plenty of other ways the world is neither safe nor fair. Cybercrime is growing. The pandemic is still with us. Environmental changes are playing havoc with the weather. And there are widespread fears about the effect of social media on the well-being of people everywhere, especially youngsters. This all sounds grim, but if there is one thing you can say about humanity, is that when we put our heads together, we are good at solving problems. And sometimes we take offbeat methods to deal with challenges. When Friday Culture was launched last year, some readers described it as a new category of media. They call it Zen journalism. There's some truth to that. Friday staff produce journalistic reports and don't avoid difficult subjects. And our attitude is different. We're detached, thoughtful, and good-natured. Other than our FridayEveryday.com website, YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we also developed various video products, including a Friday Conversation and an evening talk show, Friday Beyond Spotlights, with Hong Kong International Business Channel. Season 1 of Friday Beyond Spotlight was aired earlier this year, and the Season 2 will come soon. At this moment, it is fair to say that the world does not seem to be a fair or safe place. But we are not going to sit and complain about it. We are going to hear from our speakers and panelists how we can change that. The author, Robert Fogum, once said, "Peace is not something you wish for. It's something you make, something you are, something you do, and something you give away." And that's what we'll be doing this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the program. Thank you.
谢谢胡晓明博士。
Thank you very much, Dr. Herman Hu, for that very erudite and stirring welcome to this conference.
现在来到今天活动重要的部分，我们今天十分荣幸邀请到香港特别行政区行政长官李家超先生为我们发表主题发言。
After the welcome, we become the main part of the conference, where I'm honoured to invite the Honourable Mr. John K.C. Lee, Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR, to give the keynote speech. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Deputy Director Lu Xingning of the Liaison Office of the Central People's Government in the Hong Kong SAR, Deputy Commissioner Yang Yirui of the Office of the Commissioner of Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Hong Kong SAR, Dr. Herman Hu, Chairman of Friday Culture Limited, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Typhoon number 8, you're all working hard. It is my great pleasure to join you all today at this forum organized by Friday Culture Limited and the Hong Kong Coalition. First of all, I think the theme of the forum today is very well thought out. The theme is Towards a Fairer, Safer World. Fairness and safety are important values well treasured and protected by Hong Kong, by our legal system, and most of all, by the one country, two systems principle. This year, as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to the motherland, we also celebrate the 25th anniversary of the successful implementation of one country, two systems. In his opening speech for the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, General Secretary Xi Jinping pointed out that the policy of one country, two systems has proven to be the best institutional arrangement for ensuring sustained prosperity and stability in Hong Kong after our return to the motherland, and must be adhered to over the long term. The Constitution of the People's Republic of China and the Basic Law form the constitutional basis of the Hong Kong SAR. Hong Kong is committed to the rule of law, and our long-standing common law tradition and independent judicial power are protected by the Basic Law. The protection of the rights and freedoms enjoyed by the people of Hong Kong, including freedom of the press and speech, is enshrined in the Basic Law. Everyone in Hong Kong, regardless of profession and belief, enjoys the same rights to embrace the development of our home, so long as he or she genuinely supports the principle of one country, two systems, loves Hong Kong, and abides by the Basic Law and the other laws of Hong Kong. This, I'm proud to say, is why we are a fair society. With rights come responsibility. Hong Kong people enjoy a level playing field that champions fairness and have the responsibility to safeguard its values. This brings me to safety. To look into this important topic in context, it will be useful to revisit a few fundamental principles. First and foremost, the Hong Kong SAR is an inalienable part of People's Republic of China. It is a local administrative region which enjoys a high degree of autonomy and comes directly under the Central People's Government. Safeguarding national sovereignty, security, and development interests is the constitutional requirement of the Hong Kong SAR, the duty of the Hong Kong SAR government, and also in the interest of all Hong Kong residents. What possible impact could Hong Kong have on the safety of our country? Just take a look back at the series of events in Hong Kong over the past decade to realize the answer. The illegal Occupy movement in 2014, the Mong Kok riot in 2016, and in 2019, the large-scale riots coupled with advocacy for Hong Kong independence and the relentless interference by foreign forces. These were but a few examples of the devastating results arising from loopholes in our system, exploited by those who cross the line and try to sabotage one country, two systems. They threaten our country's sovereignty and security and defied the authority of the Central People's Government and the Basic Law. It was against this background that the National Security Law was enacted by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress in 2020. This was followed by the improvement of Hong Kong's electoral system, ensuring the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong is upheld. These swift and decisive moves by the central authorities serve to prevent, stop, and punish acts and activities that seriously threaten the country's sovereignty and security. These significant steps have effectively restored order and stability. They have also restored the enjoyment of rights and freedoms for people of Hong Kong. Hong Kong now continues to be an open, safe, vibrant, and business-friendly metropolis, and is back on the right course of one country, two systems. The unique and innovative principle of one country, two systems has ensured that Hong Kong has the strong support of the country while staying connected to the rest of the world. We are all set for making greater contributions to the country. But we should not be complacent about the status quo and stop here. In fact, even after the implementation of the national security law, there are still underlying national security threats from different fronts. Dissemination of wrongful messages and slandering accusations can still be seen at home and abroad. I must stress that attempts to glorify violence and weaken the rule of law has no place in any law-abiding city. Hong Kong is no exception, and we will do everything we can to ensure such actions do not tarnish our hard-earned effort in restoring law and order. As committed in my policy address announced 2 weeks ago, we must stay alert to threats and dangers, adopt bottom-line thinking, and sustain our efforts in safeguarding national sovereignty, security, and development interests. To build and maintain a solid foundation for security, we have to continue our efforts in 4 major aspects. First, on law enforcement and intelligence. Our law enforcement agencies will take investigatory and law enforcement action against acts and activities endangering national security. We will step up efforts in gathering and analyzing intelligence related to national security and counter-terrorism, in particular, online information and counter-spy intelligence. Second, to strengthen public education and publicity. A correct understanding of our country, including but not limited to the national security law, will greatly enhance Hong Kong people's resilience against instigation or incitement by people, organizations, or countries with ulterior motives. This starts from education for our very young. That is why we will strengthen national education in schools to enhance students' sense of national identity and national pride, which could in turn raise their awareness of safeguarding our country's security. We will encourage schools to review their curricula and organize national education activities. Teachers are required to uphold professional conduct. The youth uniform groups of our discipline services will be given dedicated training. All these are done to help nurture a generation of law-abiding citizens who love the country and Hong Kong. Third, to strengthen our legislation. We will do good and comprehensive preparatory work for the fulfillment of our responsibilities under Article 23 of the Basic Law. We will conduct thorough research to prepare effective, pragmatic, and practicable solutions to address national security risks and threats, past and present. The solutions are also expected to be sufficiently forward-looking to address potential risks. Lastly, to tell the good Hong Kong story well. Much of the misperception towards Hong Kong by people overseas was the result of the spreading of fake news with ill intention. The government will robustly react to wrong or misleading information. More importantly, we will be proactive and make good use of our discourse power to tell the world all the good and true stories of Hong Kong. Later this month, I will be traveling to Bangkok to attend the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, and will surely be telling the world how good Hong Kong is, how this Asia's world city is back on stage again. Ladies and gentlemen, the forum today is about a fairer and safer world. Yes, the world today is undergoing profound changes unseen in a century. The COVID-19 pandemic, high inflation, interest rate hikes, trade disputes, geopolitical tensions, and military conflicts. All of these have created uncertainties and in turn weakened the growth momentum of the global economy. Fairness and safety in the world is not commonly seen as before. But as I stated in my policy address, Hong Kong faces both opportunities and challenges, but there are more opportunities than challenges. The next 5 years are important for Hong Kong to break new grounds and achieve another leap forward. With the support of the Hong Kong community and all of you, we can do our part in developing a fairer and safer society. We can continue to succeed in ensuring the resolute, full and faithful implementation of the policy of one country, two systems. We will continue and contribute to protecting the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of our country, and to contribute to the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. With that, I wish this forum every success and all of you a fruitful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
谢
Thank
谢
you,
李家超行政长官给予大家从深入角度剖析如何与政府一起努力，令香港未来变得更璀璨美好。
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lee. That really does give us a bit of a vision of what we can achieve in future, maintaining the one country, two systems policy and working together to help Hong Kong flourish. Now, I do want to say that some of our guests, including Mr. Lee and Ms. Liu and Mr. Yang, may have to leave before the end of the before the main panels. So we'd like to say thank you to them for attending, and they're free to leave us. Thank you very much.
李家超行政长官、卢新宁副主任、杨毅瑞夫特派员会先离开，因为公务的原因，我们给掌声，谢谢他们。
Thank you. Now, the main part of the conference will be two panel discussions, each lasting for 45 minutes. The first will focus on achieving fairness in a polarized world, and the second on safety from individual to global perspectives.
接下来，我们今天有2个分论坛，每一节大概45分钟。第一节论坛主题是在2极世界达至公平，第2节论坛主题是从个人到全球角度的安全。
To start with, we are delighted to have with us as moderator Mr. Patrick Zhang, who is Chief Executive Officer of Chow Tai Fook Enterprises Limited.
现在我们有请周大福企业有限公司行政总裁郑安业先生主持第1届论坛。在这个环节，分享嘉宾包括香港特别行政区行政会议召集人叶刘淑仪女士，阿拉伯埃及共和国驻香港总领事阿穆尔汉拿威先生。 全球未来研究所创始人钱德南奈尔先生，亚非法协香港区域仲裁中心主任陈晓峰律师。
Okay, our speakers were introduced in Chinese. Let me introduce them in English. We have the Honourable Mrs. Regina Ip, Convener of the Executive Council of the Hong Kong SAR, Mr. Amir Wafiq Mohammed El Henway, Consul General of the Consulate General of Egypt in Hong Kong SAR and Macau SAR. We have Mr. Chandran Nair, founder of the Global Institute for Tomorrow. And we have Mr. Nicholas Chan, Director of AALCO, Hong Kong Regional Arbitration Centre.
Thank you, Nuri. Thank you, Blinky. And hello to everyone. Hello to all of you in Hong Kong. Thank you for taking the time. It's typhoon number 8 out there, but we're gathered here together. And hello to you all waking up in Europe. Thank you for joining us. And to those of you in the Americas, good evening. My name is Patrick Sang. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Chow Tai Fook Enterprises. Very pleasure to be here today, and thank you all for joining us in this very, very important panel. First of all, on fairness. We want the next generation to grow up in a fairer world. We have with us a very distinguished and prominent panel of speakers to share with us facts, observations, personal stories, insights, and recommendations. In an ideal world, everyone should be given a fair go in a fair playing field with fair rules, where people can live with dignity and hard work is fairly recognized and rewarded. But what kind of world are we living in now? Some say all men are created equal, but is that true? And is there even fairness? What rule of law, international and local law, rules, practice, norms, and deviance apply today? Are they fair? Are common values being protected? Does the majority rule to protect minority rights? Or is minority overruling majority rules? Is there room to reduce political tensions and unilateral trade impositions and improve international treaties, conventions, and rules that were perhaps made under the old world order, and some during the era of forceful colonization? Are there still direct or indirect discrimination? Are we being fair to the culture and people living in developing countries where international norms are formed and applied? Can we have fairer rules that foster more collaboration, trade, and brighter future? What does the future hold? This panel will explore how we can build a fairer world as we explore the status quo and map out a fairer world. I thought perhaps what we would do is allow each speaker to share with us some of their thoughts and personal experiences around this topic, and then we'll go one by one to discuss a few themes. Maybe with that, I'll start with Chandran.
Thank you can you hear me? Thank you very much. I think this is a great title, towards a fairer, safer world. I would just think that we should add just, because that's about justice. Fairer allows for a lot of interpretation, expansive interpretation, and therefore we don't have the ability to say this is unjust, because the whole issue of justice allows for a framework of rule of law and order. So I would just add justice and fairer and safer world. I think we can all agree on what does a safer world look like. Sorry? Okay, yes, I'm just adding something for the committee to think about. Justice. Justice allows us to actually have a frame of reference around international laws, etc., which everyone starts to seem to pontificate about, but then we are not able to pin it down. So I think a safer world we all will understand. We live in an era of existential threats. We know what that should look like, and most of us can agree upon. So one of the things I think about saying that we all want fairness and a fairer world is I think that is going to be the responsibility of this generation. And let me try and make one point. We've all lived in a very unfair world. The modern world that we all now live in, and those of us who are citizens of former colonies, etc., we did not live in a fair world. The modern world was built around colonization, extraction of wealth, etc., and essentially lots of people not having rights. The citizens of Hong Kong till 1997 were essentially members of a colony. They were not equal citizens to the colonial powers. So we've not lived in a fair world till now. We all want that. But the problem is that power resides in terms of how economic global power is distributed. And what we're seeing today is the inability of those who essentially presided over a very unfair world having difficulties coming to terms with the rise of the rest and sharing power equally. So I end by saying that, in my view, the what I call the global majority, the non-Western world, are beginning to understand that to claim their equal rights, they are going to have to confront those who have essentially monopolized power over the last 500 years. It is understandable that those who have monopolized power are not going to give it up easily enough. So I think we need to understand this is our hard work. It is not going to come easily. And finally, why are we here today in Hong Kong talking about this? Because in the last 5 years, Hong Kong, China have experienced the massive reaction from the United States and others, and I'm being very blunt and open here, so we don't sort of fudge anything here, to the reaction to the rise of China and the inability for the first time in 400-500 years to confront the rise of a non-Caucasian civilization. That is the problem. And that's where the privilege of power residing in the West is now becoming so obvious that as the West reacts to this new rise of new powers, the rest of the world is becoming a lot more aware that what they thought was the multilateral arrangement to build a fairer world actually mask something much deeper. And that deeper sense is we need to maintain economic power and retain that beyond the post-colonial era. And that recognition is something we need to understand, but to the point we have to do this peacefully. And the inability of Western powers, led by the United States, to form partnerships that are equal will be the test of our times. And I think we have to respond to that in a peaceful way with eloquent discussions, new narratives, and convincing the world that our intentions, and particularly China, because it is the rising power, its intentions are peaceful, and therein I think China has a lot of work to do as well to convince the rest of the world, because its intentions are, as far as I can see for myself, coming from a former colony, not one of domination. But being so large, it can be easily construed as that. So China has a lot of work to do in that regard as well. So those are my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chandra. And I think we'll come back to the point around justice and fairness. I think it's also a good segue to Ambassador. Ambassador, when we were discussing earlier on, you were telling him about some personal journey, right, around fairness, justice, and a safer world. Perhaps you can share with us some of your thoughts around that.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me part of this great discussion, actually. So I have a government job at the moment, so I will go. I'm an expert in geopolitics, but I will stick to my own personal journey and story about this topic. I'm here before you wearing a tie. A tie is actually, well, it's Italian tie. And it is a Croatian invention that the French have now spread around the world that we have to dress. So I should have been here wearing something totally different and speaking to you in another tongue, not English. So this is the start of this journey. I actually was born in Holland and educated in many parts of the world, including Australia, and then I traveled through Africa, America, all parts of the world but Asia. So this is my first experience in Asia after experimenting with the world of post-colonial order, which was practically all the instruments that we have, the multilateral instruments that were referred to. So these instruments, coming from that part of the world, we have to abide by those culturally, economically, politically. I come from an ancient civilization that is very proud to be old, different, and we would have liked to continue to have our own cultural heritage respected and inter-exchange with other countries. This is a problem that I believe that I have confronted myself with my kids. I was just counting a personal story of my kid when he was 2. And this was after 9/11. So everyone that came from my part of the world with my name had to be randomly selected. I remember being randomly selected 6 times out of 6 on flights, carrying a diplomatic passport. which doesn't get you very far, but it's still, there's some sort of an understanding that if you carry a diplomatic passport, you might not be a suspicious individual from a suspicious part of the world. I don't want to, this is not at all to point fingers at anyone, but these are things that have shaped my own life. So my son at the age of 2 or 3 was taken out of the stroller so he could go into the X-ray machine, and he had a jacket on. So they had to take his jacket off to make sure there was nothing in it. So the media portrays us, as all of us, as terrorists or people that are a threat to the rest of the human race. This has affected my nation, it's affected my friends. I don't want to go into a lot of these details. What we should look at is how these instruments that we've all inherited did not manage to allow some of us, the older nations like China and Egypt and other nations, I don't want to mention names so it's not sensitive to any countries, so I'll just mention the 2 that were here. We have not had enough time to familiarize, to interact. We were all a product of the soft power of another culture. Again, I'm not going to talk geopolitics. I've actually served in Afghanistan. I'm an expert on security, amongst other things. I've lived through what is called the Arab Spring, which was had a lot of parallels to your latest social unrest in 2019. I'm not very young anymore. I'm trying to look young and talk to the young people, but I had to choose between the communist thinking or the what some people call imperialist or Western thinking when I was young. That's what we had. We had 2 choices. And then Egypt and a couple of other countries decided to do the non-aligned movement, which was an attempt back in the 60s to have some of these smaller, medium-sized countries to provide an alternative. Ex-Yugoslavia, it's no longer Yugoslavia, India and Egypt and a few other countries that also do not exist anymore, decided to try to do a non-aligned group. And this non-aligned group would serve as a platform to not let the world go into a polarized two polarized camps or 2 different thoughts. Because these thoughts do not meet. They will not meet, so one of them has to dominate by conflict. And to some extent it has worked, but I think now that I've arrived here in Asia and I've seen Hong Kong and I can see what this city provides, it reminds you a little bit of Egypt, as in a melting pot of all these people with its unique culture. Yes, there is a very strong Chinese character to which is perfect, that everyone should be very proud of. But it allows this hope that this is a platform, a gateway, where people can still come and not be segregated or looked upon. I have not had a single person tell me off since I got to Hong Kong. Normally in Europe, every 2 or 3 months, and again, I love Europe. I'm not trying to be negative, but every now and then someone will stereotype you and either make a comment or treat you in a way that I do not appreciate. I am not citizen number 2 of the world. I'm very proud to where I come from. So here I see in Hong Kong, we should all work towards, we will come back to that later, what do we do in the future? We don't want to just fret over the past, but from a 3rd world country, it's not even 2nd world, it is categorized in some books as 3rd world, which I don't know what that means. When you have big problems that disturb the stability, so the stability leads to, or security leads to stability, and stability leads to prosperity. Now, if you don't have those 3 in any sequence you want, you have a socioeconomically deprived group of people who have no hope. They have no reason to be proud of their heritage, of their culture, and they're poor. What they do is they have no future, and then they become extremely dangerous. Now that has to be, and most recently, we had the COVID problem. I was in Cairo. Well, we are a country like other countries like India. We have a very big pharmaceutical industry of generic drugs. We didn't have a solution for it. We didn't know what it was. And I was on a panel very early on where people asked me, do you think when the COVID, when they find an antidote for the COVID, there will be a problem sharing this? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I was the only one on the panel. I said, yeah. The rich countries will not give it away because they have to keep their own alive first. There's no way we're going to get it, even if because it's going to be in small amounts. And that was what happened. And the only country, again, that is always blamed of being a threat sometimes is China, and I hadn't come to China to experience this part of the world, was the only one that actually started giving whatever it had come up with, which was the Sinovac. We did not get our hands on anything else but the Sinovac for a very long time. Now, these things are very important for all these ex-colonial parts of the world. So I think I've gone over my limit. I apologize. It's getting too personal. I'll come back.
No, but thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for sharing with us your personal journey. I think going along the lines of stories around government, politics, we're very honored to have with us the Honorable Regina Yip from Hong Kong, most eloquent speaker for Hong Kong. And I'm sure, Regina, in your travels, you have also experienced topics around fairness and justice. So we'd love to hear your views around it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Patrick. And thank you to the organizers for having me as a participant in this very interesting discussion. I was worried that I might have to give this a miss because of the LegCo meeting this afternoon. We were supposed to have a debate on the 20th Party Congress. Fortunately, Typhoon Signal number 8 truncated the meeting so that I could come to this forum. First, I share Chen Zhom's views about the difficulty in defining fairness. Fairness means different things to different people. And we have seen how President Trump used fair trade to suppress free trade. So I'm always cagey about talking about fairness. But what I'd like to point out is Western thinkers and leaders have always seen the world as falling into two camps. In the 1990s, the eminent political scientist Samuel Huntington, in his famous book, The Clash of Civilizations, referred to the West and the rest. China, I won't name other countries. China was definitely lumped into the rest, meaning those are countries that are backward, poor, uncivilized. With the rise of Asia, led by China and other large economies, Asia's been doing very well in economic growth than the West. Then you have a new narrative about the rest and the West. And it appears that the success of the rest has caused some problem in the West. So we now have a new narrative led by President Biden, who said that the world is now locked in a struggle between democracy and autocracy. Again, lumped China into the autocratic camp. I think this is most unjust and unfair. It's not only outdated, it's anachronistic. I think it is wrong in the first place to adopt this dualistic vision of the world and to have an oversimplified view of what is democracy. From my experience of serving in the Hong Kong government and the legislature, I can tell you there is truly no one-size-fits-all political system for all countries and territories. Hong Kong democracy had a late start in Hong Kong. The British did not push democracy until the early 1990s, when they knew they had to hand Hong Kong back to China. Then they started to push participative democracy, I think really with a view to introducing curbs on the central government's power on Hong Kong overall jurisdiction. And that we experimented with democracy for 25 years. I think direct elections to the legislature started in 1991. And what happened? The legislature, our LegCo, has become dysfunctional, extremely chaotic, and at times even violent. So the central government had to help us to reform our system. And since the decision made by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress at the end of 2020, and our follow-up action in the local legislature to introduce new legislation to inaugurate a new representative system in the legislature, order, dignity, efficiency has returned to the legislature. In the year or so since we have reformed the electoral system, we have enacted many important legislation. We have opened up medical registration. We have abolished mandatory provident fund offsetting. We are making progress in producing more land and housing for the people. So it is most unfair, to describe our reform as anti-democratic, a democratic backslide or illiberal. I think it is simply wrong to divide the world into the so-called liberal and illiberal camp. We are fully committed to the protection of rights and freedoms in Hong Kong. They are the international covenants on civil and political rights and on economic, social, cultural rights are implemented in Hong Kong via Article 39 of the Basic Law. And our judiciary functions perfectly independently. And we have first-hand testimony from Madam Beverly McLaughlin of Canada and more recently Lord Neuberger, who sits on Court of Final Appeal, that our judiciary functions entirely independently and there has been no interference whatsoever with our judicial system. So I think, the first step toward moving toward a fairer, juster, and safer world is the Western countries would have become industrialized before us. And in fact, because of this, they have contributed much more than us to the climate change, to pollution, the use of carbon fuels that cause climate change, They must recognize this is no longer a unipolar world, In all international organizations, they must allow room for countries from the West, whether it's China, India, Indonesia, or Egypt, to have a seat at the top table, to have the opportunity to take part in the making of rules, regulation, and standards. And I hope the Western media would cooperate by giving us a voice, make sure that our voice are recorded accurately. I won't ask for fairness, but accuracy is very important. So I'll just leave these thoughts with other members of the panel and the audience.
Thank you very much, Regina. I think Chandran, you have a response, or?
I just wanted to add one thing. When we talk about unfairness, we are not talking about the past. We are talking about unfairness now. And we need to understand where that unfairness comes from. It comes from power. Regina talked about the Western media. It has power. So I just want to identify the three realms of power. One is military, and the West, through history, seems to have little reluctance to access military power. You can study what that is. But it has no reluctance to intervene militarily, and you can talk about the industrial military complex in the United States. The second one is economic. The ability to essentially use what was the grand bargain of the Bretton Woods arrangement to weaponize finance. It's terrible. The world will need to respond. It will respond. I was with an Iranian friend this week, and they are not necessarily supporters of the regime or the government, etc. But the death and destruction that has been inflicted by 30 years is unjust on Iranian people, babies, children. So that is unjust. So one is the monetary system, which again is the institutions. And the third area is media, the ability to distort. And the only thing I would say is we should not be asking the Western media to represent us fairly. We should go out there and change the narrative. And that's where I think we need to wake up. We've been negligent. Of course, they have the historical advantage of having captured that space. So people in Iran too, my friend was saying, listen to the Western media. They don't listen to CCTV or so that's where we, I think, have to do a great amount of work, because the Western media is not going to give you that space.
Thank you, Chandran. And I think as hopefully our organizers will, as a first step, right, be addressing some of these issues. But I do want to get to Nick. I know, Nick, you are also an expert in arbitration. Maybe you can share some of your views around fairness.
Thank you, Patrick. Friends would know I'm a lawyer with IT AI background. So today I'm representing ELCO, Hong Kong Regional Arbitration Center. ELCO is an intergovernmental organization with 47 members. And together they've decided to set up a regional arbitration center in Hong Kong to help resolve disputes, both government to government disputes, government to business disputes, and so on. I think it's important that we live in a rule-based community, rule-based world, society, where if there are differences, let's follow the rules. If we agree to the rules, let's abide by the rules. If the rules are outdated, let's together improve them. For example, if law falls behind the development of technology, hindering economic development, we should work together to positively update the rules. There's been a new development over the last few days. The Central People's Government and the Hong Kong government have announced the signing of a new memorandum about the preparation of the IOMED, International Organization for Mediation. The International Organization for Mediation will have the benefit of having a new center based right here in Hong Kong. It's a vote of confidence for the rule of law here, and it would be helpful as countries, governments, if they have disputes. In the local level, we already say mediation first. But now at the international level, we could also say not only mediation first. You could mediate right here in Hong Kong, resolving disputes, so that we won't have World War III. We can respect what we've agreed to under our UN Charter and the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, where we talk about equality, respect of others, respecting of others, economic development, choice of political development system. So I would end by this introduction by saying, if we could just reach out with our hand to Chandra here, we can make friends, but at the same time we can see, as the Chinese saying goes, there are difference in lengths in our fingers. So I think apart from the difference in length, there's different dexterity, agility, but by working together, we could have a fairer, safer world. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Nick, for your comments. I think the importance of diversity and respect for each other, I think we all appreciate that. Regina, I know you wanted to respond to Chandran's comments, right, around some of the conflicts that we're seeing.
Well, following up on Chandran's comment about the sources of power, you mentioned military capabilities, economic strength, and the power to control the global narrative. In today's world, there's also a very important fourth factor, technological power. And we have seen some leading technological country have weaponized their technological system. Not only that, and it is well known. I don't mind being quite public about this. Take the U.S. for example. American writers themselves, they acknowledged in their own writings that the U.S., when they first started, they benefited from British textile technology. They also took away a lot of the trade secrets of the British textiles technologies, And technology should be open, should be open for everybody to learn and from the whole world to benefit from. And a lot of the technologies these days soon become open. You know, the world has benefited from the sharing of technology. Look at the contractor, semiconductor contractor, TSMC. By working for the American chip designers, you know, they have improved efficiencies and brought loads of benefits to the whole world. So I think it is, again, really unfortunate, not only unfortunate, it goes against global interests, really, to ban exports of technology to certain countries just because they are rising, you know. So I think, and many have pointed out, I read a piece recording what Mr. Morris Chang, the founder of TSMC, said, the efforts to forcibly relocate semiconductor productions back to the US would not work, you know, because it goes against the global division of labor. You know, there will be a lot of waste, inefficiencies, and the whole world would be poorer as the result. So this is something I think we should think more about and talk more about.
Thank you, Regina. I think thanks for pointing out this whole new arena, right, in technology. Nowadays, we talk about the internet, we talk about the metaverse, we talk about Web3. How do we define fairness in those arenas, right? Chandran, do you have a comment? Or?
I just wanted to say to the point that Regina made that, you know, when we talk about the technology and at the moment using trade barriers, etc., to sanction countries, prevent, you know, Google is good, Huawei is bad, you know, how's that work, right? So when we look at that, we need to understand that technology is a continuum of human development. And I was just thinking about Amir's country, you know, agriculture, early methods of agriculture were a technological innovation. Those were exported and copied. There was no patent. Imagine if no one could do that and no one copied others, how would we have fed the world? So I think it's, you know, but also we need to understand whilst technology is a powerful instrument, it's also the great source of inequality. And therein lies the issues of how do we restrain certain technologies and governance systems, etc. That's the only point I wanted to make about that. Yeah.
Nick, you have a...
Oh, sure. I'd like to you know, respond to Regina's point. I fully agree. Why reinvent the wheel if you've already done it, right? But you know, but to your point, I think as we move from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, we're trying to empower the individuals to not have to be sort of, you know, their rights taken away by some platform companies. So as we move there, new rules are being rewritten. Some people rewrite it with smart contract and on blockchain. But these are things I think legislators, you know, parliamentarians, consul generals, ambassadors, you know, we have to understand these new developments and, you know, create a better, fairer world. Thank you.
Ambassador.
Well, thank you. There were a lot of things that we should have, as ancient Egyptians, patented before. You know, we provided food for the Romans a long time ago. So. One thing about the international order is we need to readdress the system that we worked on, and you know, Huntington worked on Clash of Civilizations. We also have tried in the past to do dialogue of civilizations with the UN. This is obviously not working. These instruments need to be addressed again. We need to look at the environment. We need to look at a lot of other challenges to the human race. And we need to find a forum for everyone to accept to be on board. I have a saying that counters Nick's saying in Arabic. We have a saying in Arabic, which أديك صباعي تاخد دراعي, which I give you one finger, you take my whole arm. So it's not about different fingers in one hand. So we don't want that world. And I think that we need the future generation to navigate this for us, because soft power, I think, was one of the main problems of our past decades. The soft power is important, and when you said, Chandra, that China needs to do more, I claim the same. Not that China needed to do more as much as we also didn't do enough, and we don't have enough from China to understand. I mean, we used to follow Bruce Lee what's his name, the American actor, Jackie Chan. But apart from that, we don't have anything positive coming from this side. We don't have a boy group like Korea or Japan or whatever. So it's mostly... Yeah, well, we need to take him to that part of the world. So it needs to be a bit more global. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Can I just say, look at American soft power. You think Jackie Chan is American. I think he's from Hong Kong, right?
100% from Hong Kong, our very own.
No, can I just make one last point? We've talked about the rest of the world, the power of the West, etc. But when we talk about a fairer and safer world, I'd like to turn inward a bit. And coming from Asia and many of the developing countries, the post-decolonization period was difficult. I always say, you know, if you didn't run the show, then it takes maybe 2 generations to learn how to run the show. In a way, Hong Kong is going through that. So the last point I want to make about a fairer world is we need to make our own governments very accountable too. So I come from Malaysia, and I can see in the region, our governments themselves, if we want to build a safer and fairer world, we can't just look at the geopolitics. Our own countries, we need to be a lot more accountable. And in that way, I think Hong Kong is a great example. Strong institutions, meritocracy, we have to deal with those things. And in many parts of the the decolonized world, those are good lessons that we have to embrace and build. And Hong Kong has very good models that we could share.
Thank you, Chandra. And I think you also mentioned earlier on about fairness or unfairness within the economics arena. And clearly with the dominance of the US dollar, and nowadays we often talk about cryptocurrencies, decentralized finance. I don't know, Nick, whether you want to offer some of your thoughts around that.
Well, I think with the development of DeFi, decentralized finance, we still have to be careful of the overall market fairness. Is it really no rules, or is it ruled between peers? I am supportive of us looking into it, but we have to move carefully. And in some ways, if some laws are being bottlenecks, we should look into that. But in some ways, DeFi is, people in the consumers being upset with being bound up by some global financial institutions that they don't think is being fair to them.
Thank you very much. I think we all agree that this is a very important topic and that we have to be bold, we have to be comprehensive, we have to have sustainable solutions. It is important and imperative that we focus on it. Perhaps before we end, I know in Hong Kong, we're now very focused on urgency and actionable items, right? Just to go around the panelists for any one immediate step or area that you can think of that can help us improve fairness. What would be the area that you would suggest? Maybe I start with you, Nick.
Thank you, Patrick. I would say update laws that ain't fair. And as you do more business, economic activity, there are bound to be misunderstanding. So find a way, such as ELCO, to help you resolve your disputes, mediate first, and then do arbitration if you can't resolve it, and get back around the table and do more business together. Thank you.
Chandra, I know you've written books about this, so what would be your suggestion?
Well, you said focus on Hong Kong, and Hong Kong, like the ambassador said, has been very kind to me. So for me, from Hong Kong, #1 priority, solve the social inequality of the housing issue. This is solvable. If we solve that problem, we have solved a huge amount of issues which are earlier referred to, which is we can't disenfranchise a large segment. And if we don't solve that, we will continue to have our critics, but forget the critics. Inside, it's just not just. It's not just. So we got to solve it. And we have intelligent people in Hong Kong. We can solve this. So that, for me, will be the #1 issue. And around the region, I think the existential sort of crisis threats we face, climate change, food security, those is where we have to focus on, rather than thinking that we got to digitize everything for what. So I think it's more about look at the basic needs. In my region, in Southeast Asia, we will add something like 200 million people over the next 30, 40 years. That takes the population to 1 billion. Digitization of everything is not going to feed them. food security. So those are the basics. In Hong Kong, for me, it's housing. Please solve that problem.
Thank you, Chandran. Ambassador?
The world is not fair. It isn't. And in many aspects. How you're born, where you're born. So we really have to come up with realistic solutions. If you're talking about 200 million here, Africa and the Middle East is adding another 400 million in the same amount. So the world is going into huge expansion and its resources have to deal with it. So we really, truly, maybe the generation Gen Z know a better solution to how to deal with how we go the future. But what we should ask our governments or our politicians, because they're the ones that make the rules, is let's not talk about the past, let's try to deal with the future together. Because if we continue to follow patterns that have not worked or patterns of superiority without embracing or engaging with the rest of us, and as you said, if you have a community where a lot of people do not have housing, and that happens in every country, and it's not just a problem with Hong Kong, maybe highlighted more, without that, the whole human race, the whole system doesn't proceed.
Thank you, Ambassador. Regina?
Well, again, I much rather rephrase your question from unfairness to inequalities, you know. As Chandran pointed out, one of the biggest problems with inequalities in Hong Kong is housing, you know. There are at least 90,000 families living in really abject subdivided cubicles, and that is one big problem we need to fix. But I'd like to also raise another problem, which contributes to inequality, and that's education. You know, I believe education is destiny. You know, and I think our government, previous administrations have made a lot of mistakes in education, pursuing quantity rather than quality, dumbing down the syllabus, if I may say so, and not giving, I don't think we should aim at equality of outcomes, but we should aim at equality of opportunity. We should provide a system for young people with different abilities to realize their potential. I think other than housing, education is something that we should, you know, fix.
Thank you, Regina. Always very well said. I think we are running out of time. First of all, I'd like to thank you, the panelists, for taking the time with us for such a lively and interesting discussion. I know we will continue to have a second panel, and I'd like to thank you all for paying attention and tuning in to watch us. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. Yes, time for a group photo, of course. Thank you. Please stay up here for a moment. We'd like to ask Dr. Herman Hu to come up and present each of you with a souvenir.
you so much， 谢谢。
Thanks for a great panel, and thank you for doing a great job leading it. So we learned a lot there about practical solutions that we can use to fix the problem of fairness in Hong Kong and the region. Okay, it's time to introduce the next panel, and let's start with our moderator. A warm welcome, please, to Professor Whitman Hung. He's a member of the Global Council of the World Summit Awards, and the topic is safety from individual to global perspectives.
接下来我们开始第2节论坛，我们欢迎世界信息峰会代奖全球理事会成员洪为民教授为我们主持这一节论坛，主题是从个人到全球角度的安全。而分享嘉宾包括香港特区政府律政司副司长张国军先生、中金公司资本管理部执行总经理杨梦阳女士、世界绿色组织行政总裁于远成博士、澳大利亚中国工商业委员会前任行政总裁、香港中文大学协理副校长、校外联系及推广金江先生。
Okay, Binky introduced our speakers, our panelists in Chinese. Let me introduce them in English. So Professor Whitman Hung is our moderator, and our speakers are the Honourable Horace Jeung Kwok Kwan, who is Deputy Secretary for Justice of the Hong Kong SAR. And we have Ms. Yang Meng Yang. She's Executive Director of the Capital Management Department of China International Capital Corporation, Hong Kong Asset Management Limited. And we have Dr. William Yu, who is Chief Executive Officer of World Green Association. And we have Mr. Laurie Piercy. He's the former Chief Executive of the China-Australia Business Council and currently Associate Vice President, External Engagement and Outreach of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Welcome, all panelists.
把时间交给你们。
Okay, thank you, Nuri. It's always nice to be in a safe place, even during Typhoon Signal number 8, that we begin this panel. Apart from safe from the typhoon or some of the bad weather, I would like to start the panel by asking each speaker to talk about what do you think, how do you define safety? What do you think are the major areas that will be a concern for safety? Let's begin with Horace.
Yeah, thank you, Whitman. I would like to share about the cybersecurity. Why? Because as everyone knows that technology permeate the many aspects of the people's daily life. The technology, everyone can enjoy the convenience brought by the technology, but on the other hand, the criminal will also utilize technology for unlawful purposes. So when we are talking about the safety concern is no longer limited to the physical world, but also to the cyberspace. Globally speaking, there is no exhaustive list of cybercrime. But we can see that, for example, from the United Nations, the Office on the Justice and Crime, they have identified 5 different categories of cybercrimes. For example, one is about the illegal access to a program or data. That is unauthorized access to computer system. That is quite common. Another one is about the illegal intersection of computer data. What it means is the hackers, for example, that they impersonate the sender or recipient and communicate on their behalf. One more example is the illegal interference of the computer systems that is about the overwhelming the servers or the routers, so to prevent the legitimate use of the the illegitimate users' access. All these are cyber crimes, globally speaking. But certainly, apart from the cyber crimes that I just mentioned before, there are traditional crimes such as forgery, identity offenses, which I can say increase in scale or reached by the user of computers nowadays, such as the phishing websites and the online doxing. And also, there is crime with illegal contents. And the most common example is about the online dissemination of the child pornography. So now, when we have an overview of the existing legal framework in Hong Kong, I would say there's no one piece of single legislation to deal with the cyber crimes specifically. All the offenses are in the crimes ordinance and the telecommunication ordinance. But taking the offense of obtaining access to computer as an example is in the crimes ordinance. Unfortunately, under a decision of the Court of Final Appeal, it held that this ordinance does not apply to a user who use of his own computer. So it means that if it does not involve another one's computer, just the use of own computer to set up, for example, a phishing website, then it will not fall within the provision of this ordinance. So that is I can say that our norm may not catch up with the technology nowadays. So there is an increasing demand for cyber safety in Hong Kong. And in fact, many different common law jurisdictions, such as the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, I would say they have bespoke cyber security law. So we have to catch up to update our law to have a much more protection under the cyber security law.
Thank you, Horace. You actually have answered my second question as well, because the first I wanted you to define safety, and the second one is what keeps you awake. So obviously, we share the same concern, because you know I work in the IT industry for 30-something years. Okay, now we have a finance lady. Wang Yang, can you tell me how do you define safety?
Right. Thank you for having me on the panel. I think safety can catch a lot of things, and under different scenario, it has different focuses. I think for a country or a region, the safety of its supply chain is very important, and globally, the sustainability of the development plays an important role. As to the supply chain, actually, it is subject to disruptions caused by natural disasters, such as the COVID we are undergoing, and also by international competition. So the disruptions caused by natural disasters are usually short-term, and the production can come back usually in a few months. But actually, the disruptions caused by international competition gonna last longer and gonna have much more important impact on the supply chain safety. Horizontally, when China becomes more important than the US in final product trade, we faces the risks of higher tariffs, and we have the trade frictions. And vertically, if you see the supply chain, actually China is very near to the bottom. On the very top is country like Russia or Australia that are the natural resources, and in the middle is like Japan and American. They have a lot of like intermediate products. But for China, it is on the bottom of the supply chain. So this makes it faces the risks of the upper supply chain being cutting off, which means you may not have the intermediate product relying on the upper supply chain to manufacture the final products. As to sustainability, reducing carbon emission is a task that the whole world is working on collaboratively. If you follow the reports issued by the International Panel on Climate Change, you may find that it is still very challenging to even limit the rise of temperature to 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius. So some green energy technology is yet to become cost effective enough to allow application in scale. And also, even the efforts for the countries and the nations to limit the carbon emission may be disrupted, such as now what happens in Europe. They unavoidably may need to loosen up its carbon emissions and lose up this control to the fossil fuel for obvious reasons. So I think from a more macro view, it's for nation or region, it's like the security of the supply chain. And on a global scale, I think environment changes and the sustainability is a key.
Thank you, Meng-Yang. I think this is very good. The supply chain, yes, there's a danger of something broken in the middle. You said natural disasters usually short term, but we just had 2.5 years of COVID, so I'm not sure how do we define short term. But your second concern actually leads to the next person. Dr. William Yu, the green guy. So we just talk about carbon. Maybe you can tell us, is it the same that what you think?
Yeah, I share similar views. Actually, before giving the definition of safety in the context of environment, I guess I can tell you what the current or the future threats are. That is climate disaster. So I would say to build resilience, climate resilience for our city to face climate disaster, that is the safety measures that all the countries should consider. Like last year, 2021, we had over 400 extreme weather incidents worldwide. And we are talking about over $100 billion of economic loss. Okay, not to mention the insurance compensation amount. So, you remember the heat wave in Europe, the snowstorm in the States, as well as the big flooding in mainland China. So we are talking about billions and billions of dollars of economic loss. So all these climate disasters, I would say, are quite fair. They happen in states, in Europe, in Asia, and also in China. So I think we need to be serious about that. All these threats have already affected our social and economic system, and will continue getting serious and more serious.
Thank you, William. I think climate changes, climate disasters, property losses, but also I think one of that will also lead to another thing that I'm always afraid of, which is hunger. You can judge by my size that food is very important to my safety, but climate changes and climate disasters do affect food and energy. So, Laurie, what's your angle?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things as I've been sitting here this afternoon I've thought about is we talk about safety, and then in Chinese we talk about 安全, right? And so we've made a very deliberate choice of words here this afternoon to focus on safety, perhaps instead of security. I'd argue the two are interchangeable, and looking at the dictionary in Chinese, you look up safety and security, and you both come up with 安全. I guess you could also argue that there's a Ping-an element to it as well. And so peace and security, you say Yilu Ping-an, we hope you have a safe trip. And so I think that in English, though, there is a subtle difference between safety and security, and certainly how the words are utilized, and indeed, in parts of the world, how they're politicized. So I think it's an interesting distinction that we've made in terms of our choice of words here this afternoon. But I think that the world needs a serious conversation on education security. And we just heard Regina Yip talk about this challenge as well. And I work for a university, and I think about this deeply. You know, education security is making sure that we invest enough in our education systems to make sure that there are enough places and sufficient quality in the primary, secondary, and tertiary education systems to power the world's development. Yes, in our previous panel, we talked about the distinction between quality and quantity, but I think we need to have a paradigm where we can actually move to an environment where we can have both. And in the spirit of telling the China story well, I argue very, very much that China is a perfect example, indeed a globally leading example, a unique example of where that's the case. So we've spent the last couple of minutes talking about issues that keep all of us awake at night. But I argue that if our education systems are working and they're powering the training and the research efforts on critical areas such as information systems, cybersecurity, the environment, sustainability, precision medicine, agrobiotechnology, then we will increase our ability to effectively address cyber, energy, food, and health. If our education system is working, then our security will collectively be stronger. Now, you could argue that by virtue of the enormous challenges that we've just discussed, our education system is fundamentally broken and it's not working. So, public institutions, universities in particular, we have a unique responsibility entrusted on us by society to respond to the security challenge. We talk lots about the proliferation of fake news and the emergence of the infodemic. And Hong Kong today is debating the merits of a fake news law and other means to combat this. But digital literacy and empowering our learners to think critically with the ability to differentiate between authoritative, facts-based news and plain garbage which is circulating on social media, that is the responsibility of our education system. And in Chinese, we talk a lot about 实事求是, right? Which is roughly translated as seeking truth from facts. And so these are the skills that we should be equipping our young people with to address the information crisis. And if we can do this, I think we'll all be safer. So to China, education has been absolutely fundamental in guaranteeing China's security. Now, when Hong Kong returned to the motherland 25 years ago, China graduated 800,000 people a year from university. 25 years later, there are 8 million undergraduate students completing degrees at Chinese universities. Let me repeat that. From 800,000 to over 8 million today. So that is extraordinary. And if you look at the correlation in China's absolute or per capita GDP over this period, it's a simple fact. The more people go to university, the wealthier a society becomes, and the greater the gains in social mobility. Now, of course, a nation needs to think about the structural and the economic foundations which will allow these graduates to pursue meaningful work, and that in itself is an economic and social security challenge. But higher education participation is one of the most important ingredients in providing the foundations of a secure society. Now, I'll talk later about what keeps me awake at night, but I just wanted to keep the conversation going, and I'll leave you with that for food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. Maybe we can begin with you then. So what keeps you awake at night?
Well, a lot of things, but right here, right now, the freedom of the movement of people, as well as technology, as well as money, capital, and ideas, is critical. I think probably the most critical element to building a more secure world. We need to increase exchanges, we need to nurture talents across borders, and dialogue is essential in the security endeavor. And COVID has created a perfect storm for us. For nearly 3 years, a massive global health emergency has paralyzed our ability to conduct meaningful people-to-people exchanges across borders. Every time a university like Harvard pulls its China program out of Beijing and moves it to Taipei, the world is a poorer place. But we're doing that against the backdrop of closed borders and a massive global public health emergency. The ability for us to actually have a conversation, for us to talk to each other off the confines of Zoom or Teams and resolve our differences like human beings is actually paralyzed right now. And we're living in a time of massive geopolitical disruption, uncertainty, and technological change. But the reality is that for almost 3 years, it's been almost impossible for us to have those conversations. And I think that is something that really does keep me awake. However, there is a silver lining here, and that is a place called Hong Kong. Because over the last 3 years, the rest of the country has been completely closed to international students. There have been something like 500,000 international students that have been kept out of commencing or indeed continuing their studies in mainland China. Hong Kong is the only city in the 伟大的中华人民共和国 that has been open to international students throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, of course, people have had to abide by our quarantine restrictions and our quarantine requirements, but there's a cliche that gets bandied around so much in Hong Kong, which is that we are the window to China and that we are China's window to the world. But actually, over the last 3 years, in the case of international students, that has remained a constant. And so we have been sustaining the lifeblood of international exchanges at a time when otherwise, because of closed borders, against a rapidly deteriorating environment, they've been very difficult to sustain. So it keeps me awake, but I do hold hope.
Thank you, thank you. I think just to add to that, yes, Hong Kong is the best place. Our problem is we're not welcoming them enough. There's still a bar of top 20% for undergraduate studies of non-local students, which includes both mainland and international students. I think we, at some area of time, we need to open that up, especially for maybe not of a Chinese U because it's a government university, but some of the private universities, they still have that, which puzzles me. But anyway, so William, what keeps you awake or you sleep very well?
I think we need to start to build the climate risk modeling to understand the possible impact, the climate risk modeling. So we need to understand the power of all these risks, the possible impact, that needs to go through a lot of scientific evaluation process. Downscale, for example, downscaling the macro global data into a more location-specific data. So the buildings located near the seaside, the one you own, whether that will be flood after 10 years, 20 years time. So you need to understand all this. You remember we experienced the super typhoon with 185 miles per hour years ago. So you saw on the TV the flooding happens in the residential buildings near all the seaside. You still remember that. So the storm surge plus the maybe astronomical time, all this, you will see how high the wave was hitting your building. So it's no kidding. I think we need to revisit all these possible impact. In the past, we admire people having a house in the mid-level, near the seaside, or built at the peak. But now, you need to ask, have you done any evaluation about the possibility of landslide? You know, all these threats, will that affect your property value? How about your mortgage loan? That leads to a series of credit risks, you know, underwriting risks, market risks, whether you got enough money to refurbish the damaged property in the future. So it's no longer an environmental problem. It's really a very complex financial problem linked with all these climate consequences. So what I would say is we need to revisit all this infrastructure in Hong Kong to evaluate the risk, whether we can build resilience, as I said before, for our infrastructure to minimize all this damage in the future.
I was going to think, I know William lives on the mountain, so I was going to say, great, you know, that's why he lives on the mountain, because it's far away from the sea. But now he's talking about landslides.
The lower part only.
Now he's talking about landslides, so we have another worry. But so, Meng Yang, what keeps you awake at night?
I actually have addressed this previously, and that is for the disruption about the supply chain from the supply chain level. Let me just explain a little bit on the disruption. Though we have COVID for like 3 years, but the disruption caused by natural disasters to the supply chain is short term. Though it's already 3 years in COVID, but we can still like buy the goods we need, and the production lines are going. So meaning that actually we've already come back, and the supply chain has its resilience to bounce back during the natural disasters. That is what I want to say.
I remember when I was hunting for masks for a long time, and then the RATs, right? So there was a been through. So Horace, it's just the suit. If it's only the cybersecurity that's keeping you awake, then you must be, you know, a good sleeper.
Yeah, I entirely agree with my fellow speakers that education is extremely important to many aspects of safety, and it does apply to cyber safety that I mentioned before. Because nowadays most people, I can say, they are self-taught and may be vulnerable to cyber crimes. But it's quite unfortunate that most people, they are learning from painful experience, work experience. That is the experience from becoming victims themselves, or from stories of the victims that as reported in the news. So I would stress that we must promote the community education on internet safety, especially when the internet users, they are getting younger and younger today. The children, the young people, they are more likely to be exposed to various cyber risks, such as the cyberbullying, sexual harassment, access to inappropriate content. So I think no matter whether the government or the community, we should promote or enhance the community education on cyber safety or other aspects of safety.
Thanks. Actually, I used to be involved in doing public education on internet ethics and security, the right way of using internet, and we went to the public libraries as well as the schools. But what amazes me is I don't know why I have to do it as a volunteer, because it should be part of the curriculum, right? Nowadays, because actually the schools welcome. I was the president of the Internet Professional Association before, remember? So every year they send a lot of invite for us, not just me, but a group. We organize like over 100 speakers to different. But I really think if we can put it into the curriculum and let the teachers teach them, it will be more effective. But of course, I know technology moves fast. I think that's one of the problems. When the curriculum is out, the technology, the cybercrime have moved to a different level, and maybe it's difficult. So, but I think I just want to follow up on Horace. I think you just mentioned as well, it's not just cybercrime, it's not just phishing. We're talking about, and it's not just stealing of data or breaking into somebody's machine. We're also talking about like cyberbullying, which I don't think we have a law against that. I remember previously I've been asked about this question. Another thing is today, a lot of our data is on the internet. So, you know, as an NPC member, I've gone through this these few years. We actually passed a lot of laws in the NPC in, you know, data security, internet security, e-business law, so e-commerce law. Do we also need to look into that? Because we're not talking about, I know we have a privacy ordinance, which was drafted in the pre-internet days, okay? And then, but today, you know, it's not about somebody stealing data from the platform. It's about the platform misusing the data or selling the data, which this is what the new Chinese law is really taking about is, you know, if and the GDPR, you know, in European, they do the same thing. I think Hong Kong is probably a little bit behind on this one as well. Should we also move into that area, which is like data security laws?
It's quite challenging for us when we review the legislation. How can we just strike a balance between the effective enforcement mechanism and the safeguarding the individual rights and personal data? Is quite challenging task for have a legislation deal with it. And I would also like to raise up another challenge that is the cross-border nature of the legislation. Because when we are talking about the cyber crimes, actually it's quite common that the crimes come from cross-border. However, but it's quite unfortunate that our crime legislation, we are territorial in nature. So how can we deal with the cross-border crimes? How can we define whether the crime fall within the jurisdiction of the Hong Kong legislation is quite challenging. But I would say that actually the Law Reform Commission of Hong Kong, they have just published a consultation paper on reform of cyber safety in Hong Kong just in October. We hope that we can enhance the legislation as soon as possible so that we could have much more cyber safety protection for our, especially the young generation.
Thank you, Horace. Actually, just to give my 2 cents, I think let's learn from the European Union. They're doing pretty well there. You know, the thing is, yes, it could be cross-border. Cyber attacks is a different story. Well, let's talk about the legitimate websites and platforms that are misusing people's data. It's a huge find worldwide. And as long as you have an establishment, even if the server is somewhere else, as long as that particular platform has a presence in Hong Kong, you can still, you know, hold them for it. Laurie, you want to add something?
Yeah, just a couple of points. So I think one of the biggest challenges we have globally is law keeping up with technology. And there are universities around the world and law firms. I used to work for a university that partnered with the legal profession to actually really get their heads around this. I mean, in Australia, we say, if you've got a real problem, it's like painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge, because the moment you finish painting one end, you have to start back all over again. And so that's the magnitude of the challenge that we have here, because the size and just the pace of change. But I think in addition to looking at our friends from Europe, I think in terms of how Hong Kong grapples with data security and privacy protection in a digital world, I think increasingly we need to look just north of the river in Shenzhen and also to the rest of the country. I mean, China's equivalent of GDPR has kind of taken the European experiment to the next level. And in this era where Hong Kong is talking about greater integration with the nation, talking about integration with the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Initiative, actually, this is a moment, I think it's a wake-up call. If Hong Kong is going to take integration with the rest of the country seriously, then we need to get our house in order in terms of data. And so working for a research-intensive university that has a lot of cross-border projects with our friends in the mainland, a big challenge we all have is actually how are we going to share data in a way that satisfies, what is a very sophisticated and very, to be honest, a people-oriented legal system in terms of data protection. So I think this integration with the rest of the country is Hong Kong's wake-up moment for us to think about how do we get ahead with this. It's not easy, but I don't think we have a choice. The other point is around education. So I very proudly have a Huawei as well as an Apple phone. And whenever my Huawei phone rings, and it also has a mainland Chinese mobile phone number on it, my Huawei phone rings. And if it's a 境外的电话, so if it's a phone that is ringing from outside China, it tells me to be very careful in terms of how I answer it because the call is coming from overseas. And so, in fact, Nuri and I were at the Hong Kong police headquarters just last week, and we were talking about cybercrime. And they made the point that the education that the Hong Kong government is actually doing in terms of public awareness is massive. But the actually people that get deceived are generally not, they're not always people who are poorly educated, underprivileged, vulnerable people. Actually, we're talking about middle-class people who are actually really well educated, who get conned. And so there's no easy fix. But I think, again, when it comes to education, we need to look at the other side of the border. Having lived extensively in mainland China, I can tell you, every single time I go to a public toilet in mainland China, it reminds me to be vigilant to my personal, digital, and cyber safety. This is a serious business because the mainland government has realized that it is a massive challenge. And so I think, once again, in terms of Hong Kong, as we look at the way forward, we need to think not just about integration for integration's sake, but also for the benefit of our citizenry as well.
Great. On that, I want to move a little bit forward to the solution part. We already talked about some of those, okay? But, what's safety, what keeps you awake, and what are the solutions? I mean, education obviously sounds like a solution, sounds like a silver bullet to a lot of things.
Some people say we're part of the problem too.
So, what do you think? Do you think, Hong Kong government is already spending a lot of money on education, okay? It's almost the second largest slide of the pie, second only to the health. So, is that the silver bullet or, any other solutions? Another problem is that what you said, that you have issues right now with people having difficulties to travel, whether it's because of COVID or whether because of the State Council of the United States issued some warnings. So, any solution to that? I mean, we have 0+3 now. Okay, hopefully we'll have 0+0 soon. But still, first of all, towards the border of mainland China is not open yet. And also, I mean, there's still a lot of traveling restrictions and warnings and things like that. And obviously, you don't think Zoom is a solution, right?
Look, I think there's no doubt that Zoom has sustained what would have otherwise been a complete disaster. And without Zoom or Teams or Tencent meetings or WhatsApp in the pandemic, I mean, let's be honest about it, what would we have done? We would have been in a very, very difficult position. But I think there's no substitute for corridor conversations. There's no substitute for being able to do what we did before we started this afternoon, and that's to just have an informal chinwag so that we can, develop a relationship, we can develop a rapport. We need to get that going again. But I think with Hong Kong now, it's not just about what 0+3 means for bringing people here. That's important, but also we need to 走出去. We need to go out. And we talk about telling Hong Kong stories well on the global stage. My fear is that we cannot expect government to do all of the heavy lifting. That's not fair on government. We need to help. And so all of us in Hong Kong have a responsibility for the welfare of this city, for the welfare of this country, to join with the Hong Kong government and to 走出去. And not just for Hong Kong. At the moment, because it's easier for us to travel overseas than it is for the rest of China, I think we have that responsibility for the rest of the country. So I think with education, you're right. We thankfully have a very well-funded higher education system. Coming from Australia, 30% of my university's funding came from government. 70% came from non-government sources. Here it's the other way around. And that is a huge advantage. And so it's not just about money and sustaining investment, it's also about people having the confidence that they're getting a good return. And we're talking now about the era of innovation, about applied technology, and what that can do for society beyond the laboratory and beyond the frontier research. That's part of it. But I think as we embark on this exciting new chapter for Hong Kong, we need to think about the value that our education system is delivering, and we need to have honest conversations about delivering bang for our buck.
Okay, that's always very hard. It takes, what, 20 years to decide, to measure. So, William, will education be part of your solution as well, or you have some better solutions?
I think education is very important indeed, but we also need to have money. That is the green finance we are talking about, and also tech, the green technologies that lead to low carbon economy, as well as the right policy and target in place in order to drive all the changes. I think green finance has a role to play, how to direct all this capital to meaningful, sustainable projects, which can make a contribution to a low carbon, economy is very important. When we're talking about the sustainable project, we mean the real green projects. Okay, try to avoid all this greenwashing. Okay, I gave the regulator a training months ago on this about the climate washing litigation, as well as greenwashing. I think Hong Kong is also established a Hong Kong green taxonomy to giving a definition to all these green projects.
Why do we want to do our own when there's a common taxonomy between the European Union and China?
EU taxonomy, common ground taxonomy, all over all these standards and
can we just
kind of
adopt
guidelines,
that?
over 200 in the world. Okay. But you need to have one for yourself, making reference to the other, communicating with the others, set a minimum safeguard standard for yourself. I think that's very important. We should work this way out. And more importantly, as I said, you have green finance, right? So like making good use of all these green bonds, sustainability linked loan. But maybe I talked about the infrastructure earlier. There are catastrophe bonds. That is a kind of financial instrument that help to diversify risk, just like paying insurance premium, on the community level. So we can get all these community citizens to contribute, converting all this existing great infrastructure to a green infrastructure. For example, increasing the green ratio in our area, building green rooftop, planting trees on the roadside. The advantages is when we have a bigger rainfall, then the water diversion, the permeability will be better. If we have all these green plants around. When we have a higher temperature, again, the transpiration impact brought by all these garden plants will help to lower the surrounding temperature. So I think all these are necessary to change our current infrastructure. That creates business opportunity that relies on technologies, that drive, kind of new growth in the green business. So different technologies to capture carbon, to save energy, all these will become a new driver for our future economic growth. We should capture all these opportunities. I think that help the planet, help our business, and also, help the well-being for all of us.
Great. So having you and Meng Yang sitting in the middle is great because Meng Yang, next question usually goes to you, and your next question will now goes to Meng Yang because we talk about green finance, right? So here's our finance lady. What do you think about green finance? Is that one of your solutions?
Well, I think actually for green finance, it's like actually it's about what is green finance first. Actually, green finance is the financial services provided to real economic to the economic activities that relates to sustainable development, and also for the green finance. Actually, the finance itself, it not only serves the real economy, it also guides the real economy. So actually, there are two types of green finance in our studies. Like one is service-oriented green finance, and then another is like guidance-oriented green finance. For the service-oriented green finance, that is in that scenario, the activities in real economy is the key driver for the adopting greener projects or adopting greener technologies, whereas the finance just support the implementation and make things happen. For instance, you make investment in the company that developed such technologies, and then for the government for the guided green finance, the incentive of the finance itself should be the driver of transforming the, using traditional energy to the new energy. So that are the two kinds of green finance we are talking about. And we believe that both should be in big place. And to address this issue, green finance and massive investment in this area is a must.
I think this is actually an area I've been paying attention recently. I mean, there's a few questions I want to ask. I'm not sure if you can give me the answer, but your number one is, you know, I've been kept told that green finance is actually, for example, a green loan from a bank actually have a lower interest rate. It was as told by some bankers. Then my friend at one of the power plants in Hong Kong, he said, yeah, but it's only 5 to 10 basis points, which means, you know, that's not enough incentive. So I want to know what is the real case in green finance? Is it really, you know, is it really makes a big difference? I know there are investors that only invest in green nowadays. Well, so that aside, but totally just pure from the cost of fund, is the green finance really cheaper, or is it just a name?
Well, I can say that in China, you're right that actually there is an imbalance in this sense. Like around 90% of the green finance are provided in terms of like kind of like green bonds, but actually it entails more. So for instance, actually this is one of the issues we want to address. For instance, like in European or countries, in Western countries, actually the like pensions, endowment, and sovereign investment fund, they are one of the key drivers that adopt this kind of green investment. Whereas in PRC, actually, it's like only 16% of the managers that adopt the ESG investment policies. So actually, we hope that there are going to be more and more asset managers that would have this kind of mandate, and also we're going to see that for the green finance, we require more direct investment as well. So that's why I say that actually massive investment is required in this sense, not only just like a green bond, but also the direct investment.
Before William jump to add, I want to throw another question at William. You can compliment or add or disagree, but there's one more thing is, right now I know the government already has the incentive for green bonds. There is something like $2 million or whatever for the administration fee. How do they judge whether it's a green bond or not?
I think that is a
Without
threshold.
taxonomy.
That is not for SME, definitely. That's for the big company. If you can achieve that amount of application, you know, because that will be more justified in terms of the application fee. The government try to waive the administrative fee. But what I want to say, we should look for a kind of paradigm shift in the traditional approach. I'm not saying credit analysis is useless. It is very useful. Banks are responsible, you know, to diversify all this in preparing a financing arrangement for the companies. But now it's quite helpless for startup. When we talk about Hong Kong, we want to position Hong Kong as an innovation hub. But do you think the startup can borrow a green loan using their IP? Okay.
I don't think they can borrow any loans.
Yeah, so finally, they only look at the asset value, okay, as a kind of pledge, you know, in order to diversify all these risks. So I think government has a role to play. How we can encourage, you know, startup to bring more invention, innovation to the city. We really need different types of green finance arrangement in place. Otherwise, we keep on saying that, but still, even for SME, it's hard for them, you know, to get enough financial support in this aspect.
Bonds obviously are for big companies, or actually for government. You know, the Shenzhen government, the Hainan government actually has to issue green bonds in Hong Kong, and I keep hearing the SAR government thanking them for that. But I don't think an SME will have the ability to actually issue a bond, or anybody will buy a bond from a SME. But, you know, when you say the government should play another role, I think government has a green tech fund, right? You're a panel of that. So
I'm sitting on the vetting committee.
Exactly.
Yes.
So tell us, you know, are you moving them to the right direction?
Yeah, we gave out millions dollars, $10 million to some very good projects with all these new tech invention, either from the universities or from maybe from some startup. But still, I think we help them to do further research on their technologies, and also preparing them to scale up maybe.
So that's just for the early stage, like a applied research stage, or is it already an enterprise?
Not too early, I would say, because it's not a VC fund. You know, it's not for the idea stage. At least you have some basic research, and now you want to test further the function or the features of your invention. So, yeah, I think it's good. We saw a lot of new invention.
So when you say the government should play more role, are you saying that we should increase the fund size, or hire more people, invite more people like you to sit on the panel?
But you see a record-breaking application to the Green Fund Committee. I think that fills the gap, because now we have VC, we have some private equity, but for a more long-term investment. But we don't have some, you know, for kind of with some basic standing of invention. They fill the gap, I would say. The next step for commercialization. I think that's a very good arrangement, actually.
Good. Mia, you're trying to add, or you're no?
I agree that actually the government can play a more active role, and also the technological innovation is very important in that sense. Like actually, one thing, the carbon emission, we need to be aware of the differences in different industries. As actually, the biggest industry that contributes to the carbon emission is the power generation, which accounts for like 41% of the total emission, and in China it's even higher, it's 52%. So in that sense, if we transfer from the using of fossil fuel to clean technology, or to cleaner electricity, and then actually we can reduce the emission a lot. And in that sense, when transforming from the fossil fuel arena to new energy, actually we're transferring to the heavy reliance on natural reserves to manufacturing. That is a huge difference. And so now the energy can be manufactured. Then it heavily relies on the technology which can generate the power, which can store the power, which can utilize the power. And all this rely on the technology. And then for the technology and also the innovations, actually it has externalities, meaning that for the innovators, they get benefit from their innovations, but also for the entire society benefits from it. But at the very initial stage, it is usually the individuals or investors who invest at the very initial stage. And at that stage, there is very high risk. So the private capital may be hindered from making such investment if the internal return is not sufficient. So in that sense, the government may need some guidance to invest in kind of very early stage or at the different stage of the development, and also in the areas where it requires more intensive capital.
Yeah, William.
I want to compliment is so when you look at the PE fund, Mang Yan is focusing on, they always look for a longer investment period with more mature technologies and operation. Now we can see the government fill the gap, the market gap, but at the same time, I think we need to encourage more public-private partnership, the participation of the government to share the risk, especially making partnership with the private equity, private fund are more realistic. That provide a bigger fund scale, to encourage different types of invention. I got some real experience that sometimes our invention, our Hong Kong originated invention, got famous in the overseas first rather than in Hong Kong. So I think we can create this kind of atmosphere to encourage more innovations here.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. But I think what I'll do is now is the Q&A session. I have this thing is keep popping up with some. Anyway, I have some questions from the internet. The first one is, while seeing multipolarization in energy competition, how do we foster collaboration to ensure climate resilience, avoid the consequence of a tragedy of comment? I think that's towards William then.
Okay, when we talk about the strategy of comment, I can explain the background here. We are talking about a kind of research in a Nature journal many years ago. They mentioned about all the farmers, different groups of farmers, they brought their cattle to the pasture, okay, to eat all the grass. So what will they do? So different farmers, they will try to consume, to eat up all the grass in their own group of sheep without leaving any to the others. So you imagine what will happen in the end. All grass gone, okay? No one can benefit. So now you have this kind of fishing practice that you need to ban the fishing practice for a certain period of time in order to let the small fish to grow, okay? So again, with this analogy, we can think about the atmosphere we share by all these countries. If we continue to emit the carbon to the same atmosphere, although you want to reduce, but the others keep increasing, what will happen? We all suffer from the climate disaster, So what I want to say is we look for collaboration. We really need to line up all these countries to work together. Although we need to overcome the hurdles like the standard, the measurement, the reporting discrepancy, and also building the trust, like the data collection, and also the sophistication of the measurement methodologies, all this. So I will say to avoid tragedy of common is we don't collaborate, we all suffer. All the grass gone, okay, we don't have anything to eat. So let's work together to work for our climate change.
Thank you. It's yeah, I think I get what you're saying, but I'm not sure if that's really a solution. We just try to persuade that those who listen, they will listen. Those who doesn't, they don't. Anyway, the second question, it didn't mention to whom, but I thought the best person to ask is Horace, because it's a very simple, short question. What is biggest challenge in Hong Kong? Such a huge, it's the biggest challenge in the question itself. But I guess because you are the government, you can talk about that.
I think everyone knows that the coming years will be quite challenged to Hong Kong and to our country as a whole. We have global challenge such as the persistent COVID-19. We have the so-called competition or restraint on the supply chain. We have restriction on our technology development, and we have national security issue. All these are quite challenging that has a lot happened a decade before. So when we are trying to formulate any public policy, I think every secretary or minister, they must take into account of every possible or potential safety problems before we implement or carry out any public policy in Hong Kong. So we must be cautious, even though we are very quite confident of the future of Hong Kong. So that's why you can see from the report of the Communist Party just a few weeks before, it mentioned many times that we must be cautious of the challenge ahead in the coming 5 years.
Yeah, I think remember you actually say overall security. So it's not just one aspect. So that it's including both national security, but also things like energy and food and climate and everything else. Okay, the next question is, I think it's for Laurie, because the world seems so divided. How can universities help the world find areas of common ground? Or is this a lost cause?
Well, I'm an eternal optimist. But I think if you look at William's lapel, you see a circle, and it's got 17 colors there. And they represent the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations has committed to. And I mention this in the context of universities and indeed all of the challenges that we face. How do we find common ground? And actually, I think that those 17 Sustainable Development Goals provide us with a good starting point. I mean, who in their right mind can be opposed to quality education, climate action, gender equality, and so on and so forth? So actually the SDGs, I think, provide us with a really good framework for us to establish common ground, and universities, through the work that they do in education and research. And if you look at any of these 17 areas, just about every university in the city, I'd argue most, if not all, on the planet will have research and education capabilities and expertise. These are a really great starting point for us to find common ground, because there is so much that divides us. But if we work collectively to that North Star, which theoretically is the one thing that the whole world agrees on, I think we can make an important step in the right direction.
That's interesting you said that. You know, I just came back from an international conference in Jakarta 2 weeks ago. And then we have competition entries. It's a competition from 180 countries. What I have discovered that it's a quite UN-related competition. So the underdeveloped countries, the Africans, the Southeast Asian and South Americans, and some European countries emphasis a lot on SDGs, whereas some of the more developed countries, for whatever reason, they do not mention it in the things that maybe they still do, or are they, So when I met people from Africa and some of the other people, they keep bringing up the SDGs are actually in part of their government policies and plans, whereas even in Hong Kong and in some of the other more developed countries, you don't see government putting SDGs as a priority or as part of their government plan. How do you say, so when you say the SDGs should be a common ground, is it really so?
Well, here in Hong Kong, we co-host, along with the Jockey Club, the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is a global group of 47 hosts. It was launched by the former chief executive when she was in office, the Honourable Carrie Lam. And so I think that it is an important anchor for government policy and for how we mobilize civil society in Hong Kong. I think it's interesting that you make the point around what the developing world is doing and what they're saying versus what, say, the West is. In university land, universities around the world, including in the West, we're all increasingly incentivized to perform against the SDGs. Times Higher Education, for example, has an impact ranking which measures a university's performance against each of the 17 SDGs. And as we know, there's nothing that can motivate a university vice-chancellor more than a university ranking. And so that's a really important and substantive way that universities are going, okay, we need to show what we're doing against A, B, C, D, and E. Just last week, QS, the other big ranking, they announced their own sustainability ranking. The University of Glasgow in a few weeks is hosting a major conference on the SDGs in partnership with Times Higher Education. I'm not giving them a plug, but the point I'm making is that in university land around the world, what I actually see in the developed and the developing world is a really strong form of consensus that this needs to be front and center of our action, our advocacy, and our collaboration.
Great. So that leads to the last question, because I think we're running out of time. So this one is for Meng Yang. I guess apart from green finance, what are the other drivers for China to achieve its double carbon target?
As to the double carbon target, actually, China has given out a very clear schedule, that is achieving carbon neutrality, carbon peak emission by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. Just a little bit background. Actually, Europe achieved a carbon peak in 1979. And that of the U.S. is in 2050, so 2005. So for their carbon neutrality goal at 2050, actually they have 71 years and 47 years to 45 years to achieve that. Whereas China actually runs a very tight schedule of achieving carbon neutrality from carbon peak in 30 years. That is a great background. As I just mentioned, you need to focus on in which industries you need to cut the carbon emission the most. That is the electronic. And I think, again, the technology.
Power plants.
Yeah, I think the power. And I think it's the technological innovation and also the investment that would be a key. and also social governance is another factor that makes sure that all these transformations from the fossil fuel to clean energy gonna transfer smoothly.
Okay. To wrap up, I want each of our panel speakers to maybe in 1 minute give us some bright side, okay, some optimistic things, and also I think it's not just regarding to Hong Kong, but more about the world, okay. To make the world a safer place, we shall, when just use William's words, we shall together do something. I think we were a little bit just into this climate and green thing a lot, but that's okay. That's what also keep me awake at night as well. But that's, from your perspective, you think in 1 minute, say, how can we be more positively to drive the whole world to a safer place? Okay, I think this time from Horace, okay?
I would say is public awareness. But certainly we must have some kind of legislation as a whole, but we must have to raise up the public awareness. So education is still my answer to that. But when we are talking about education, from my experience in Hong Kong, we must talk about not only the input, because every time when we are talking about how to reform the education, there must be public appeal for much more financial resources that is input-oriented. But we do not look at the quality. When you see that in the last decade, the government has spent significant resources, especially financial resources, in the education system of Hong Kong, but you can see the people of Hong Kong are still not happy with the education system of Hong Kong. So how to focus on the output-oriented, that must be what we should achieve in the coming future.
Great. Meng Yang?
I think it's focusing on the result and focusing on the goal and taking actions. Actually, the issues are there. We've talked a lot. And actually, the solutions are there, and many studies and feedbacks from the industry. And so actually, I think people know what they should do, but the essence is that whether you can implement it and execute it properly so that all this can take effects.
That's a very optimistic way. You think people already know? I'm not sure. William?
I would use 4 characters to start. TCFD, that stands for Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, TCFD. So that's a global reporting framework. Will also be adopted by Hong Kong government, stock exchange. So to request all these listed companies to study the climate risk and also the financial implication brought by the climate risk to their business operation before 2025. So I think that really draws the attention of the private sector about the potential risks they are going to face. I think that's excellent. So I would say not only relying on the standard, but also as also expected by like the United Nations, they hope to involve more the private sector, the business sector, the most resourceful segment to make a contribution to combat climate change. So to face the risk on the one hand, we need to do something. On the other hand, trying to draw resources from private sector to help to solve a big global problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Laurie?
Well, Nelson Mandela once said famously that education is the one weapon we have to change the world. And as I started my remarks here this afternoon, I said, if our education system is functioning effectively, then we will have answers to cybersecurity, we will have answers to food, we will have answers to the climate crisis. I accept what Horace was saying in terms of we need to focus on the outputs. And I think that there has never been a more exciting or a more important time in Hong Kong than today for us to do that. If you look at critics around the world, they say that this city's golden days are behind it. I actually think that we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and yes, it will take 20 years for us to evaluate success, but we shouldn't let that get in the way of the job ahead of us. We have heard already from a long-standing member of the Legislative Council in Hong Kong this afternoon that we have gone from an era of chaos and dysfunction into one where legislation is getting passed to fix some of the deep-seated issues that we have in society. The challenge now for education is for us to respond to what this new era represents. And yes, we need to be absolutely focused on the outputs. But I think right here, right now, at this critical turning point for this city, at an extraordinary time of challenge and opportunity, I think we've got the fundamentals to make something really, really important for what I think is China's global city. Thank you.
Thank you. I think on that, I think we have all learned a lot. Some of it I knew beforehand, some of it was unexpected. I think we think about safety is a clear present concern for everyone in all kinds of aspects. Solution obviously is, originally I thought it was always communication, collaboration, so collaboration among countries, collaboration between the government and the private sector. But what seems to be the conclusion is that education is the most important things, because that came to be, if you do it right, it will lead to a lot of things. So on that, that concludes our session. And once again, let's join hands to thank our panel speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Hung, and thank you to all the panelists. And thank you, especially Laurie Piercy. That last statement, I think, just summed up everything so powerfully. Now, please stay on stage for a group photo. Thank you. I'd like to invite Dr. Herman Hu to come up on stage, please, to present a souvenir to our guests.
有请胡晓明博士寄送纪念品给我们的分享嘉宾。谢谢各位嘉宾的分享，我们今天真的获益良多。
Thank you very much, panelists and Professor Hung. Now I'd like to invite to give the final remarks Dr. Kennedy Wong, Vice Secretary General of Hong Kong Coalition, to the stage. Thank you.
我们今天活动已经接近尾声，现在有请香港再出发大联盟副秘书长黄英豪博士为我们致总结发言。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Wow, what a wonderful afternoon. And wonderful speakers, nice topic, just fitting for the typhoon outside, and you're all resting at home. I hope you agree with me that the topic chosen by the Hong Kong Coalition and Friday Culture today, towards a fairer and safer world, is very fitting. In fact, if we change the word world to Hong Kong, that would probably nicely become the a topic also for our government, including our Chief Executive John Lee, who set the tone for today's discussion. We have heard in 2 panels from 8 speakers from very diverse backgrounds. And, well, we cannot seek consensus from such a sort of wide range of speakers. But what I heard from, for example, the first panel is we need to understand, why this world is not fair and why this world is not equal, because we have different culture and we have different background and history. So we have to perhaps learn to understand each other more. From the Consul General of Egypt, he said that, Egypt is a melting pot of different cultures. So these are the words that I got. And then from Regina Yip, our convener of the Executive Council, she said that we should avoid clash of civilization. The book written by Samuel Huntington. So in order to do that, I think in this world, in this global village, we have to learn and understand from each other. And then that leads to the second session, where the 4 speakers all share their perspectives on how to make the individuals and the world safer. We need to tackle climate issues together, because if we don't tackle them, climate issues can turn into global issues, food security issues, financial issues, and it would be an issue for us all. And quite fittingly, at the end, the consensus was we need to improve education. We need to empower our younger generation to learn to tackle these issues. And I also heard that together, collectively, we can make the world safer and fairer. So that was my take-home value. I'm sure you have more. But in any event, I thank you on behalf of the Hong Kong Coalition and perhaps on behalf of my friend Herman Hu of Friday Culture. Thank you so much for attending this forum. And we'll for sure organize more, and we very much look forward to talking to you all and interacting with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wong. Thank you.
谢谢黄英豪博士。
Thank you, Dr. Wong, and thank you to everyone involved, all the panelists and the speakers and guests of honor, and especially our 2 organizing groups, the Hong Kong Coalition and Friday Culture. I hope you'll attend future gatherings.
谢谢黄英豪博士，感谢大家参与今天的论坛，特别鸣谢香港再出发大联盟及 Friday Culture， 希望在不久将来的活动再跟大家见面。
In the meantime, if you want to check the highlights or see certain speeches again, do check our YouTube channel and our website, fridayeveryday.com.
如果大家想观赏今天的活动精华，也可以上 fridayeveryday.com 网站浏览。谢谢。
Thank you and good night.
谢谢大家，再见。